I was lost in Bogota, Colombia. I was 26 years old in June of 2017 when I walked into a bus station at 10:30 at night trying to catch one of the last buses back to my hostel. My phone was dead, I had no cash on me, and I had no idea where in the city I was or which bus I needed to take. In my sorry excuse for Spanish, I was trying to ask a young couple nearby if they could help me out, but they looked at me with wide eyes and shrugged, not able to understand what I was asking them. Then from behind me, I heard a voice, and this voice said, in English, it said, "You, come with me." And so I turned around and I saw just the most intimidating man I've ever seen. He was about a foot taller than me. His head was shaved. He had 6, 7 piercings on his face. And he's standing there staring at me going, "It is in a trench coat, like a black Matrix-style trench coat, floor length. And he's beckoning me onto this bus that's just about to leave the station. And so what did I do? I panicked. The doors were beeping, they were just about to close. I had no time to think about it, and so I looked up at him and I croaked, "Okay." And I left onto the bus right as the doors closed behind us. Immediate regret for that decision. I had no idea where in the city of 7 million people this stranger in a trench coat was taking me. And then it hit me that I was about to get mugged. Eventually, the bus came to a stop. The man gestured for us to disembark. We walked out onto this dark, empty city square. There's no one else around. And he put his hand on my shoulder, and I braced myself thinking, here it comes. And then he said, "Just go straight down this street here." And he even warned me to watch my back as I went because it wasn't a good part of town. I'm like, "I don't think you'd have any problem, but okay, thank you." And after a quick goodbye, I took his advice and I turned around and I saw him running back into that bus station with his trench coat billowing behind him like a cape. And he was running to catch a bus that was going back the opposite direction, the one we just came from. And that's when I realized that this stranger had gotten on the wrong bus, had risked missing the last bus of the night back wherever he needed to go, and paid for yet another ticket just so he could point me in the right direction. His name was Santiago, and because of him, I found my way back. I was 3 months into a year-long round-the-world journey when I met Santiago in Colombia. I had dreamed of an adventure like this ever since I was a little kid. I remember on Christmas Day when I was 8 years old, I pulled a tiny globe out of a stocking my grandma gave me. I used to have my dad quiz me on cities and states and countries, and the text was so small that I had to use a magnifying glass to read the names all packaged in their borderlines like presents to unwrap. 5 continents, 26 countries, and over 40,000 miles traveled. That was the journey ahead of me as I awaited my one-way flight to Mexico in March of 2017. With no reservations, no plan, and only the backpack and little camera bag you see here, I had no idea what awaited me, or how I'd change along the way. But the more borders I crossed, the more my perception of them started to shift. And I came to understand how we can change the way we see borders from being tools for divisiveness to opportunities for discovery. This first shift happened very early on. I was crossing the border into Guatemala from Belize, and I quietly laughed to myself as the Border Patrol agent opened my passport with one hand and scrolled through Facebook with the other. And without even a glance up at me, she stamped my passport, handed it back, and sent me on my way. Couldn't be easier. And Guatemala would become one of my favorite countries during my year abroad, but it's also where the reality of my privilege really started to sink in. While crossing the country, it was impossible not to notice the pervasive poverty caused by things like corruption and inequality and a lack of economic opportunity. Now, these problems are not unique to Guatemala by any means, but I thought back to the nonchalance of that Border Patrol agent. And I think the reason for it was that she knew I would not stay. I learned then just how privileged I am to have been born behind the borderline I was born behind, and just how wildly privileged I am for my freedom and ability to cross them easily. By seeing firsthand the lives that others are born into, I was better able to recognize that privilege and empathize with those without it. Privileged travelers like me are everywhere, and social media is full of travel influencers that edit their photos into oblivion and curate their content into these fictional stories with themselves at the center. Reality often looks a lot different. I was in Nicaragua having dinner at my hostel, and some of us got talked into something called volcano boarding. At the time, it was marketed as snowboarding, just not on snow and down a volcano. And we were skeptical, but then we were shown all these awesome pictures of people posing with their boards, going down the volcano, maybe doing a trick, and it was convincing. We fell for the marketing, we signed up, we were excited, we thought this is gonna be awesome. Reality had me looking a bit more like an alien life form that a NASA rover might have captured on another planet. But yeah, there I am in a hot, smelly, lime green and yellow, I don't know, like discount hazmat suit is what it looks like, jumpsuit, but slowly, very slowly sledding my way down a bunch of rocks on a glorified wooden plank. Now, if you still think that this looks kind of cool, I should have you know that it was probably this exact moment that I distinctly remember thinking, why does this exist? TED, we're here for TED. It's all about ideas worth sharing, and I'd argue that this is not one of them. So it wasn't what Instagram promised me. It did not live up to expectations. Central America, on the other hand, continued to exceed them. To be honest, I was a little afraid to travel to this part of the world just because of everything I'd ever heard on the news. But everywhere I went, I met incredibly friendly and warm and welcoming people, and that fear, it just dissipated. It went away. Now, I'm not trying to downplay the very, very real challenges that Central America faces, but my lived experience there was completely different than the picture so often painted on the news. There is this middle ground between the highs we're shown on social media and the lows we're shown on the news that is still unknown to us and will always be available for us to discover, but can only be discovered through personal experience. In that space exists surprising, worthwhile, and truly enriching experiences to be had. This evolution within me became apparent when I was crossing into Spain and the customs agent asked me the extremely standard question, business or pleasure, and I was completely caught off guard by it, and to my absolute horror, I heard myself answer, pleasure. And it came out sounding a bit like that because there's just no normal way to say it. Right? In what other situation do you tell someone you're here for pleasure? It's weird, and you'll never see that question the same way again, so you're welcome. But I realized I hated the question, and not just because I hate answering with pleasure, but because I don't think those are the only two options. And I wanted my answer to be curiosity. I'm here because I'm curious about your country and your culture and your people. I saw a border and I dared to seek what's on the other side, and that childlike curiosity of a little kid studying a globe through a magnifying glass, it overpowered any fears or preconceived notions that I had. And so here I am, random customs agent dude, not for the pleasures of my personal consumption, but for the curiosity of culture. I thought back to the times that I had been guilty of traveling for my personal consumption and realized that my understanding of a country or a place remained surface level. This style of travel, it never gets at the beating heart behind borders. It never acknowledges that what might be a vacation destination for us is a home to someone else, and we are just guests in it. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't treat ourselves when we travel. Of course we should. But in addition to asking ourselves, what can I see there and what can I do there, we can also ask ourselves, who can I meet there? By consciously adding humans back into the equation, I found that my most memorable experiences weren't the big tourist draws, but instead were the little moments between strangers when a border was crossed and a connection was made. Cambodia in Southeast Asia was one of the last stops on my journey. While there, I visited what's known as one of the killing fields. In 1975, fields like these were used by a radical and ruthless government for the murder of up to 3 million Cambodians, an estimated quarter of the country's population at the time. As I walked past pits in the ground where human remains are still known to surface after it rains, I was reminded of the sheer power of division, of the horrors humans are capable of when we see our differences as threats. Places like this are difficult to visit, but I think we should visit them because they remind us of what happens when we draw lines in the sand and declare everyone on the other side as less than ourselves. And this genocide happened within the borders of Cambodia, and I realized that borders don't just exist on maps to define and divide physical places, but exist all around us and between us in our everyday lives. I thought back to when I met Santiago in Colombia and how I had drawn that line in the sand with my judgment of him. But Santiago crossed it and provided me with one of the greatest acts of kindness I've ever received in my travels. I was in Tokyo, Japan, my last stop, and as I waited for my flight home, I thought of the famous proverb that had served as a bit of a mantra for me along the way. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. I was at the end of my 40,000-mile journey of 26 national borders crossed, but countless more invisible ones. Now, I know that we will probably always have these borders between us, but instead of seeing them as ways to divide and segregate us, we can recognize them as the opportunities for discovery that they are. And we can rest assured that those we meet beyond them are not living lives that are beyond our understanding or our capacity for empathy. I believe that no matter where we go in the world, there will always be someone there to say, "Welcome. I'm happy you're here." And we can be those people ourselves, step by step. Every day, we can cross the borders between you and I and us and them. And maybe the difference you make will be no more than a single step on a 1,000-mile journey we're all on. But just imagine the difference we'll make if all of us take that single step across the borders between us and towards each other. Thank you so much.